It's time for another episode of Paraphrase Power. So the point of this mini-series is for you to improve your skills of paraphrasing or summarizing what you've read. Having that ability to read something, put it into your own words so that you understand what the author is trying to say and that you can use that to help you answer questions is really critical. It's the most important skill for really any of the reading sections, whether it's SAT, new or old, or the ACT. So what I want you to do is read this paragraph and either write down, that's preferable, but either write down or at the very least say to yourself what you think the main idea or paraphrase or summary of this paragraph would be. And then after you've done that, start watching the video again and compare your paraphrase to mine. So go ahead, pause the video. So how would I paraphrase this passage into a quick sentence? Something like this. Native Americans are still not understood by people today, just like they weren't understood by people 350 years ago, for selfish reasons and because people think that Native Americans are fundamentally different. Right? That's a quick and dirty summary of the paragraph. Now, we can go into more detail on this. We can go through this sentence by sentence so you can see where this comes from. In many respects, living Native Americans remain as mysterious, exotic, and unfathomable to their contemporaries at the end of the 20th century as they were to the Pilgrim settlers over 350 years ago. Just like what we said, people today don't understand Native Americans, just like people back in the day didn't understand Native Americans. Native rights, motives, customs, languages, and aspirations are misunderstood by Euro-Americans out of a culpable, in other words, they can be blamed for it, ignorance that is both self-serving and self-righteous. In other words, they are willfully ignorant about Native Americans because it serves their own purposes. Part of the problem may well stem from the long-standing tendency of European or Euro-American thinkers to regard Native Americans as fundamentally and profoundly different, motivated more often by mysticism than by ambition, charged more by unfathomable visions than by intelligence or introspection. In other words, people think that, oh, well, Native Americans, they're different. They don't operate like European Americans do, right? They're not ambitious. They're more mystical. You can't really reason what they're doing. It's something unfathomable. Their beliefs are kind of mysterious. That's at least what European Americans have, according to this author, said about Native Americans, which is why they claim not to understand them. Okay, so that's the basic breakdown of what's going on in this paragraph. How could we use this summary? How could we use this analysis to answer a question? Well, let's go ahead and do that. So here's a question this is from a PSAT. Go ahead and check out this question. Read the paragraph again as you need to answer this. Pause the video and see what you get. This question is a specific question. It's about the Pilgrim settlers and why the author referenced the Pilgrim settlers. What's the point? What's the purpose or the function? And if you look at the choices, they each start with a verb: to invite, to suggest, to establish, debunk, or draw. So we want to know what this reference does, why the author has included it. So let's go back to the passage and try to come up with our own answer first. Remember before we said that this first sentence was saying that people today don't understand Native Americans, just like they didn't understand Native Americans 350 years ago. So we're drawing a link or a connection between what people understood about Native Americans 350 years ago and what they understand about them more or less today at the end of the 20th century. So let's go to the choices. Is it to invite reflection about a less complicated era? Be very careful. There's a trap here. They want you to look at the word pilgrim and say, oh, the pilgrims, that was so long ago. It was less complicated, right? Because there was no technology and it was a simpler time. Okay, that's all well and good, but that's not what the passage says at all. That's all of us putting our own assumptions, our own associations onto the choice, onto the passage. Nothing here says anything about that this era was less complicated, right? It would have to specifically say that or at least strongly imply it for that to be right. So we'll get rid of A. Suggest the lasting relevance of religious issues. Again, you look at the word pilgrim and you say, oh, the pilgrims, they were religiously motivated, right? Well, yeah, okay, so maybe it's something like B. But again, the passage, particularly this sentence, says nothing about religious issues, so we can't go with B. C, establish a contrast with today's reformers. So number one, it's not really a contrast. It's really showing the similarity between these two groups. So contrast doesn't really work. And today's reformers, well, it's not really saying anything about the reformers. There's no sense here that there's any reforming going on. Again, they're just showing this comparison that people back then and people today are about the same when it comes to their views on Native Americans. So we can get rid of C. Debunk a myth about early colonial life. Again, we see this word pilgrim and we think of early colonial life. Fine, seems to be a connection, but are we debunking a myth here? No, there's no myth that's being debunked. So you have to be very precise with the choices. If it's not mentioned in the passage, it's not the answer. So we're left with E. Hopefully this is the answer. Draw a parallel to a current condition. Now, on first glance, this seems really general compared to these specific choices here. And that's kind of the point. The reason why A through D are wrong is that they're too specific, in the sense that their specific things that they say are not in the passage, whereas E is so broad and general that it does map onto the passage pretty well, right? So again, we are drawing a parallel. We're drawing the parallel between Native America, people today and their views on Native Americans, and people 350 years ago, particularly the Pilgrim settlers 350 years ago. So there's your parallel. Now, what's the current condition? Now, this is where it's a bit more generic, but the current condition is the condition of what people think about Native Americans, how people view and understand Native Americans today. That's the current condition, quote unquote. Again, yeah, it's very general. It doesn't seem like it hits it specifically, but that's why E ends up being right, because it's so broad and it fits into what this sentence is doing generally. That's why it's the answer. So this one is E. Hopefully that helped you to see how we break down these passages and get down to the answer. To learn more about Reason Prep's SAT, SAT subject test, and ACT video courses, go to reasonprep.com/enroll, and you can find the link in the description below the video.